Good evening and welcome. I'm Sanford Unger, Director of the Free Speech Project here at Georgetown. And we have many of our students who work for the Free Speech Project with us tonight. You might want to raise your hand so people can be. This is our first program that we've done jointly with the Center for Film and Media Studies here at Georgetown. Thank you to Sky Sydney for bringing the idea of the film to us. And it's also experimental in the sense that we're doing a live in-person program at the same time as a virtual program. We're offering this to a virtual audience as well as a live audience, and there will be an online audience later for a video of the program. So be thousands and thousands of people who eventually see what we're saying tonight. That's probably true, actually. That sounds like a boast. The other thing that's unusual about it is we're going to talk about this film, and we'll show the trailer for it in just a moment. And we're also going to talk about the case of Julian Assange, which has been going on for a very long time. And so a lot of people have a lot of complex thoughts about it, and I think we'll have some interesting discussion. And we will, of course, as with all our Free Speech Project programs, have a civil conversation, but also give people an opportunity to ask questions who are in the in-person audience anyway. So let me introduce our participants this evening. Gabriel Shipton on the far end there, who is the brother of Julian Assange and producer of the film called ITHAKA. John Shipton, Julian Assange's father, and also, and in most respects, the subject of the film, which is a very interesting thematic emphasis on John and his activities. Sorry, thank you. Always helpful to have someone in the audience who's sensitive to that. Do I have to repeat everything I've already said? No. Yes? Well, we're happy to have you here, and we're doing this as a live program and a virtual program, and later on video, and we're very happy to have you with us. Next to me is Allison Stanger, the professor of international relations, international politics, and economics at Middlebury College in Vermont. On leave this semester, teach at Bard College and a little further down the way in New York State, an affiliate of the Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences at Stanford, affiliated with the Santa Fe Institute, working on a project at Harvard, a peripatetic, very productive professor, and has written quite a bit about whistleblowers and their role and who's a whistleblower and who isn't. We have Jane Turner with us too. Hello, Jane.
Hello, Professor. Nice to be with you.
Nice to see you. We only learned yesterday that Jane lives in Minnesota. So we made quick adaptations. John McCabe worked it out so that we would have Jane Turner as if she were live in the room. She is a former FBI special agent who led the Bureau's very successful program combating child sex crimes and crimes against women on Indian reservations in North Dakota. And everything was great until she began to reveal some issues and corruptions within the program, was retaliated against, went public with some of those concerns. I may not have this exactly right, Jane, but went public with them. And she is one of the very small number of people who have challenged this kind of retaliation in federal court. And in 2007, a federal jury awarded her $1.5 million in reward for her public service efforts in revealing this government misconduct. And I think there are probably very few people who have won those awards, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right, Professor.
So we think she's pretty good expert on whistleblowing to present. We're going to start by showing the trailer of the film that Gabriel and John have made, just to give you a sense of it. We will be showing it tomorrow night. It will be available in the Herman room of the Healy Family Student Center on the other side of campus. And so 6 o'clock tomorrow evening, it'll be available to be seen in its entirety.
Can we talk about your contact with Julian through his childhood? It's part of the story, I think.
It isn't part of the story.
Yeah.
The story is that, I'm attempting in my own modest way to get Julian out of the ship.
Julian Assange is the hero of our time.
He was the darling of the left.
All of a sudden, he's a puppet of Russia.
My name is John Shipton. I'm Julian Assange's father.
WikiLeaks found that Julian Assange has been arrested.
One of the most notorious and controversial figures in custody.
Assange will remain behind bars until that extradition hearing, which has been set down for the end of February.
I urge the Department of Justice to drop the charges.
The maximum jail sentence of 175 years.
Because he published the truth.
How does it feel to be the father of such a controversial figure, somebody who's known around the world?
Was that him on the phone before?
Yeah.
What are you talking about on a kind of regular basis?
If Julian is extradited to the United States to face these charges, he will be the first, but not the last.
What are your worst fears?
That it just collapses under the strain.
It looks as though what journalists do for a living is seen to be a criminal act.
Shipton, keep it up, man.
Thank you.
I wish I had your energy, I really do.
I'm done. I'm fucking winning out.
Why do you think there's not a great public love and support?
This is really, truly a good question.
What's at stake? If he goes down, so will journalism.
But if people walked away from this film understanding you, how would you feel about that?
We're here, and this has only come about because we have a child in the ship, and I want to get him out.
I think we should start, Gabriel and John, by asking you what you're hoping to achieve with this film. It's almost 2 hours, and it's very focused on this case. When did you finish making the film?
So we finished making the film April last year was the when we finished cutting it around April 11th. So it's almost a year old now. And we started filming it in 2019, around the end of 2019, when in 2019, Julian was taken from the Ecuadorian embassy. He was put in the maximum security prison in Belmarsh. And he would have been there 4 years in April. And so it was at that time when he was taken and put in that prison, he was being kept in a solitary confinement in that prison, in a part of the prison that is that they call the health wing of the prison, but the prisoners refer to it as the hell wing, because it's where they keep the most desperately suicidal, terminally ill prisoners. It's the most, the darkest place in what is already a maximum security prison that has, 800 prisoners, 20% of whom are convicted murderers. Julian's on the same cell block as terrorists, convicted terrorists as well. So it was when I went to visit him at that time with John and John Pilger, a journalist, and I'd never seen Julian in a state like that before. And I left that day feeling that feeling that I might not see him again. And so that's when we started thinking about a film, or I started thinking about a film to tell the side of the story that that as Julian's family that we understood, that we experienced, this side of what's happening to Julian, and also for audiences to get to know Julian in a different way, to really humanize him, because he's suffered, certainly he's been totally dehumanized. He hasn't been able to attend his court proceedings since January 6, 2021. So he applies and his applications are rejected and no reason is given. So he's essentially being taken out of view, and he can't speak. So, John and Stella speak for him. And that is part of this sort of dehumanization process that makes it easier for people to accept what's going on and what's happening to him.
John, is there, at times in the film, you appear to speak about a larger mission, some larger questions that you think are embodied by this case. Do you want to just...
The Goodall, who's the attorney representing...
Are people able to hear? We might need you to take that microphone off and speak directly into it.
Is that working?
Yes.
Put it up. Does that work? Goodall, who was the attorney for the New York Times back in the Pentagon Papers day, he won the case. It prevailed over the government's intention to destroy Ellsberg, Daniel Ellsberg. He was the first to recognize that this is a case of global moment. Now, that's in a number of areas. We can list them for you. First of all is the administration of law, due process. Second, human rights. They're all been abrogated. The man has no rights. He's held incommunicado. The third is one that embraces everybody, and that is the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. One of the most profound and admired aspects of any constitution of any country in the world, that and the Bill of Rights.
John, keep thinking about that microphone.
Yeah, the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America is a profound document which embraces everybody. You don't have to be a journalist, a publisher. And the Bill of Rights, another profound document that attaches to the Constitution of the United States. Both of those documents have spread their influence and their admiration for the United States and its Constitution around the world. The abandonment of that civilizational artifact, or those two civilizational artifacts, both magnificent. The abandonment of those is a great scandal, and actually more than a scandal, a mistake.
Alison, you've written about this case and about larger issues of free speech and constitutional rights. And do you agree, I would have to ask you first, do you agree that this case has that profound significance?
I would agree that can you hear me okay? I'm very loud. I would agree that from a certain vantage point, it does have that significance. But to that, I would have to add that it's a much longer story. My acquaintance with WikiLeaks goes back to its origins, when its beta site pronounced that this was going to be a whistleblowing site that was going to be available to every community in the world. They would be free to post the information they had, and then the relevant user community would be able to determine what the significance of the information was. And it had some very moving language, which I wish I had here with me to quote. But then it kind of morphed over time. I think it morphed in part because it didn't have the impact that we wanted it to have. And so it moved into a second stage where they produced a video that was very much directed against the United States and was a package of information in a specific way with a specific spin. And then came the release of the documents that Chelsea Manning.
And that was in 2010.
That's in 2010. And
2010, yeah.
And that was handled in a very professional way. You had the relevant, you had a consortium. You can correct me on any of these facts if you have a difference of opinion.
Yeah, well, I think we should start the.
Just let me finish the trajectory I want to paint. And then that was in collaboration with the New York Times, The Guardian, and so forth. So then that all went brilliantly. There were no charges pressed against him under the Obama administration. Then somehow all the documents leaked. They were originally being interpreted by these organizations as what was harmful and what was not. A lot of effort was put into it.
Like the Pentagon Papers.
Like the Pentagon Papers. Then somehow they all got out on the internet. Some people thought that Julian did that. And then it continues forward to some new charges being raised against Julian Assange in 2019 under the Trump administration that are twofold. And one of them has to do with, I think, freedom of speech issues. That's whether WikiLeaks is a publisher. The other has to do with this allegation that Julian Assange conspired to hack into the computers of the Pentagon and help others do that, and also help Chelsea Manning cover his tracks or her tracks at this point in time to camouflage what had gone on. That's what brought down those twofold charges that led to the Espionage Act being invoked. And the thing that makes it complicated, even more complicated, is that Julian isn't an American. Julian Assange is an Australian citizen. And the First Amendment is wonderful, but the way that the US government interprets it is they're not defending the First Amendment around the world. They want to protect the First Amendment for US citizens and on American soil. So it's got those global dimensions that make it complicated as well. I think the last thing I would say that's quite interesting to me is that I think if you consider WikiLeaks a publisher, that you don't need the First Amendment to potentially protect them. They might be protected in the same way Facebook is protected under Section 230 of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. But that too is under consideration currently by the Supreme Court of the United States. Right. So I guess the point I'm trying to make for you here is not give you an exhaustive history, but just to show you how what WikiLeaks was evolved over time. And the horrible thing that happened in 2010 was the American people and corporate America sort of joined together against Julian Assange. He really is in some way the first victim of cancel culture. They just one by one shut down the ability to raise funds, Visa and MasterCard. I could just list for you the corporations that didn't want to have anything to do with them. And then he made them, he turned to RT, Russian television, and had a television show with the main propaganda channel of the Russian government. So that affiliation isn't so great. Then he's also seen in Citizen4, with Edward Snowden. So for all sorts of reasons, it's a very complicated case. I don't dispute in any way, shape, or form that the suffering he's going through right now is hard to watch. And this has been going on a long time, and you can perhaps speak more to his current mental state. But I just wanted to give our audience a flavor of some of the complexities and
how it's grown. Jane, I hope you'll interrupt us whenever you
yeah.
have something to say. But right now, I'd like to ask you whether you embrace Julian Assange as a whistleblower, as a fellow whistleblower.
Well, thank you, Professor Unger and Mr. Shipton and Allison Stanger. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I really had a lot of concerns about becoming involved in this because this whole situation is a frothy mix of controversy. And I do believe Ms. Stanger put it quite succinctly when she mentioned the ARC. But to answer your question, Professor Unger, no, I do not believe that he is a whistleblower, and I'll tell you why. First of all, there are definitions for whistleblowers, and usually those definitions are based around the fact of an insider who has evidence of misconduct, illegal or improper conduct, and exposes it either to the authorities or to the news media. It's very simple. It's a person who informs on a person or organization engaged in illicit activity. I have been in the whistleblower realm for the last 25 years. I'm an advocate. I sit on whistleblower boards, and I have written about their stories, and I have listened to them, held their hands for the last 25 years. And if you go to WikiLeaks right now, you'll see that on the front page, they have fish rot, which is a case out of Iceland, which involves Johannes Stephenson. I know Johannes Stephenson. He is a whistleblower, and he fits all that criteria to be a whistleblower. Mr. Julian Assange is not a whistleblower. He does not fit the criteria. However, I will say he is a publisher. And in all the things I have seen regarding his statements, I don't ever see him having said he was a whistleblower. In fact, he wrote to the French president and said, quote, "I am a journalist who has been pursued and threatened with death by the US authorities because of my professional activities," unquote. So he even sees himself as a journalist, which is how I see him. And a journalist and the media is protected under the First Amendment, which John Shipton referred to, which is extremely important. But we can't get a whistleblowing mixed in with the media. That's just not how it works. That's my personal opinion. When it comes to family, that is certainly a hill I'll die on. So I can understand the Shiptons and their feelings, but really he's a journalist. He is not a whistleblower. And if you go to any sites for whistleblower who speak for whistleblowers, if they have Julian Assange listed as a whistleblower, I see that more as trying to get your money than actually standing behind him, because he is a publisher. He is part of the media, the fourth estate. And I'll certainly agree with that.
Gabriel?
Yeah, I totally agree. Julian's not a whistleblower. He never worked for the US government, never signed any confidentiality or any documents with the US government. You can see, usually the Espionage Act is used against whistleblowers, over the during the Obama administration, it was ramped up. I think Obama had the most
more prosecutions,
yeah, of whistleblowers
than all other presidents combined.
Yes, that's right. And since the Pentagon Papers that John mentioned earlier, so that traditionally that's how the Espionage Act was used until now, until under the Trump administration. They came up with this new way. to use it against, as Jane described, someone who's a publisher and a journalist. So this is a new thing pushed by the Trump administration. I don't know if you've read Mike Pompeo's book, but he basically has, I think 5 or 6 pages dedicated to Julian and how he is the champion of this prosecution, how he pushed the Justice Department to launch into this prosecution. So, if you look at the history of it, really it's, that's where it's come from. In 2017, Mike Pompeo, in his first speech as CIA director, called WikiLeaks a non-state hostile intelligence agency. And a lot of people at the time, a lot of press advocates at the time thought, what is this? They've never heard of this classification. But what that actually meant inside the CIA was that they could use the same techniques and the same measures that they used against, say, the Iranian Secret Service or the FSB without any congressional oversight. And so that's when we saw there's an ongoing case in Spain. The security company that was meant to be protecting Julian in the Ecuadorian embassy, there were 2 employees from there who turned into whistleblowers, and they gave all this information to this Spanish judge who's launched this investigation. And that leaked information showed that the security company that was hired to protect Julian had actually been recording all his meetings with his lawyers, they had microphones inside the women's bathrooms, recording, because Julian thought, okay, no, they're not going to be, they're not going to put microphones in there. So he'd do his meetings with his lawyers in the women's bathrooms, but it turns out there was microphones in those bathrooms as well. And in that Spanish proceeding, it came out that the head of the security company was flying with this material to the US every 15 days. He did over 100 flights back to the US. And then last September, there were 3 journalists here in Washington, Zach Dorfman, Mike Isikoff, and one more, I can't remember his name, but they launched, they had an in-depth investigation with over 30 sources from within the intelligence community, both former and current, who confirmed all this leaked information, that in the Pompeo CIA, there were plans to even kidnap Julian from the embassy. And that plan made it as high as the White House. There was plans to murder Julian, but that didn't make it out of the CIA. And when in this report, in this Yahoo News report, the DOJ, when they came with this plan to kidnap Julian, the DOJ said, well, what are you going to do when you kidnap him? You can't just bring him, we can't put him in a Guantanamo, we can't put him in a black site. Wait for us to get some charges together and then get him out of the embassy. And so from these different sources of information, we can sort of map exactly what happened through 2017. I just want to also comment, you said WikiLeaks released a video against the US government, and I think you're referring to the collateral murder video. Yeah, and I just thought, it's just to let that, that video shows an Apache helicopter gunship murdering 2 Reuters journalists, and the Reuters journalists are lying on the ground dying, and a van that has children on the way to school stops to pick them up. And then the helicopter gunship opens fire on that van as well. And so that is the sort of information that WikiLeaks published. And to say that that is like a video against the US government without actually going into the detail, I think is a bit of a, deceiving the audience here.
I would just add that my source for that is Yochai Benkler at Harvard Law School, who described the arc of WikiLeaks in terms of these 3 transformations. And I think that the point of objection with the video is what it left out. You're right that it captured that, But what it left out was a group of very suspicious men who looked like they were about to open fire on US
Well,
forces.
those were men with cameras. Those were men holding cameras. The video is 15 minutes. I think you should watch it. I think you should watch the video.
Forgive me, it's quite objectionable to say that sort of thing. The video itself is an entirety videoed from the helicopter gunship's camera. All the voiceovers, Crazy Horse 1 to the helicopter pilots are there in the record. You can watch it and know exactly what happened. The pilot lied and said there are 5 men with AK-47s. You can excuse that a little bit by saying that the photographer had a telephoto lens, I guess. So as a war crime, the first part you could need to examine, but we would say it leans towards a war crime. The second part, the Good Samaritans coming to pick up a wounded man off the street, crawling along the gutter in his last breaths and picking him up to put him in the car while the pilots of the helicopters are begging Crazy Horse 1 or saying things like, pick up a weapon, pick up a weapon, and begging Crazy Horse 1 for permission to open fire on this, what they call a bongo van, with 2 kids in the front seats and these 2 people picking up a mortally wounded man. Oh, for fuck's sake. It's just wretched. Now, the other thing, some clarity is needed. There are 18 charges. 17 of them are concerned with the possession of classified information, not top secret, mind you, classified information. The possession of classified information, not publishing. That's the tilt. The 18th charge is a charge to assisting the breaking of a passphrase. I'll make this point really strongly. All of the leaks that Chelsea Manning made, every single one of them, come about as of her position. That's clear. She had already downloaded all of the information and approached the New York Times and others who couldn't take it up. And so she went to Julian. That's clear. These are exact moments of fact. To take the universal arc of the beginning of WikiLeaks in 2006 to its end in 2017 when Julian got banged up and is now held incommunicado, in itself a fundamental breaking of due process. He can't speak for himself. He can't even go to court. They knock him back. Fundamental. Those 17 charges, he is charged with total 170 years. 5 years on the computer intrusion allegation. They're the facts. Chelsea downloaded all of that material except for one item prior to speaking to Julian. She could do so as a fact of her position.
Both of those things.
Alison, you need to get that microphone closer.
Yeah.
I think it's
Both of those things could be true though, right? Chelsea Manning could have downloaded all the materials and Julian Assange could have been involved in encouraging other hackers
maybe we look
to
to
do things, but we just don't know, right? We don't know.
That's not true. We do know exactly because the communications between Chelsea Manning and Julian over a particular, the assumed communications, the allegation of those communications is over a message service, a particular and specific message service. We know exactly what's cooking here. They are the charges. There's no charge at all with the cosmic trajectory of WikiLeaks from 2006 to 2017.
Let's let Alison respond to that, John.
Yeah, I would just start off by saying that, you know, I myself wrote a book on whistleblowers and was scheduled to speak on it at the Pompeo State Department and was canceled. So I'm no fan of the Pompeo State Department. I'm just stating that. The thing that's problematic is this Russian dimension to it. Particularly, no.
Let's look at that then.
Hear me out. Julian Assange was on the payroll of RT. That's an indisputable fact. You can watch his presence on the Russian television network.
That's it. He licensed that show to RT, so it's not on the payroll of RT. So Julian produced that show with Dartmouth Films in the UK.
Dartmouth sold it to
RT. And so, you know, it was a license, and that's all. So to say that he's on the payroll is error.
I mean, it's scandalous. You can't do
that. That's splitting some hairs, though. But then there's
not splitting hairs. He made it under contract to Dartmouth Film. Dartmouth Films flogged it around the place until I got a buyer, which is RT.
So RT paid the money.
RT paid Dartmouth Films.
And then Dartmouth Films paid Julian.
I don't know.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point I'm trying to make is that there are these bizarre.
We understand the point you're trying.
There's documented evidence in the Mueller report.
Here we go. This is a beauty.
Hold on a second, John.
Hang on. Connections between Julian Assange and Roger Stone, right? And the GRU, the Russian military intelligence.
Roger Stone was an aide.
Direct aid to Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
And the release of these emails that perhaps tipped the election. Now the problem is that there are war crimes of the United States. Well, we could talk about that too, but the world is complicated.
When comes time for the questions, I'll be happy to recognize you. Let's not interrupt, okay? Go ahead, Alison.
That's all right. The last thing I wanted to add was that if you look at WikiLeaks, the site, from the moment Donald Trump declared his presidency until his election as president, and months thereafter, I haven't checked it since, there was not a single piece of material from Russia. Nothing negative about Russia when there was all sorts of oppressive behavior and corruption with the oligarchs and some murders. Nothing appears whatsoever. It's all focused on the United States.
It's not true.
Well, you can show me the piece.
I suggest you look. You don't sound like you've even looked at the WikiLeaks site, to be honest.
I haven't looked at it since the fall of.
Did you know who you're speaking with today? I mean,
I haven't looked at it since the fall of 2015. It lost credibility for me.
Can I just extract out of this some facts, please, just briefly? In 2017, the head of CrowdStrike testified to Congress, closed door, under oath, no evidence of penetration of the DNC servers. That wasn't released until 2020. Adam Schiff kept it secret. It served his purposes.
Sorry, I missed that. What was the piece of
Served whose purposes?
It served the purposes of that section of that. I don't want to say Democrats because I like the Democrats, but it's the section of the Democratic Party that were embarrassed by the DNC leaks, LEAKS. not hacks. The testimony was made by the head of CrowdStrike that there was no evidence of exfiliation by hacking of the DNC files. They kept it secret so that they could continually run with this lie, this scandalous lie, that Julian was somehow involved with Russia, and the absurdities of the Steele document that had, you know, tested
The so-called Steele dossier.
Yeah, the Steele dossier, another set of scandals, you know, that delivered to the.
That's been discredited, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a
Steele
great article
dossier.
by Jeff Girth.
Yeah.
You probably read it.
Right,
Yeah, it's
right.
a very long, in-depth article that goes into all.
4 parts.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just to repeat the two facts so that we are aware of what's cooking here. In 2017, the head of CrowdStrike.
What is CrowdStrike?
CrowdStrike is the firm brought in by the DNC. By the way, they didn't bring in the FBI, the DNC, to investigate the servers, the DNC servers. There is no evidence of exfiliation by hacking of those servers. 2017, kept secret until 2020 to serve the interests of those people who wanted to destroy Julian and WikiLeaks and associate Julian and WikiLeaks with the Russian Federation.
And why would there be people with the motive of destroying Julian Assange and WikiLeaks?
In the DNC leaks,
DNC being, of course, the Democratic National Committee
Party, showed that they had manipulated the pre-election, what do you call it when you select the
primaries?
The primaries. They had manipulated the primaries to exclude the winner. They excluded the winner. The evidence is there. The winner of the primaries was Bernie Sanders, but they wanted another person. So they excluded the winner. All of that information is there for anybody to read and understand. That's why Debbie Wasserman Schultz had to resign. They're facts.
Alison, do you go along with the suggestion that Julian Assange played the role of a journalist, a publisher, and a journalist in 2010?
Well, he's certainly a publisher.
Publisher in the sense that his
His entity is putting material out into the world, and we're in the internet age where this can spread anywhere. He is, but the problem is that he has, for whatever reason, kept company that makes the US government suspicious of him.
And so you think
so
that's
you speak about war crimes, the connections between Assange and the Trump campaign and potentially with Russia. It's Russia that's now accused of war crimes by the International Criminal Court. So in a sense, it's these strange associations that make him seem controversial. A lot of it can't be sorted out entirely. If there's a trial, I think we'll learn more.
Oh, gee.
If it's an open trial.
Serious gymnastics going on here.
I'm not trying to I'm absolutely honest about my reading of the record. And I'm willing to look at any new evidence.
This is religious cleanliness. Why can't we just deal with facts?
Yeah.
Religious. I was in Berlin, and in 1933, Hitler was in Berlin. Somehow I'm a sinner? That's absurd. It's religious. It is not journalism.
Payroll of Nazi Germany, that would be a problem.
I wasn't even born. I'm making it.
Well, you were the one. You're the one who introduced 1933 in Germany.
This is religious. It's not, you say that because they're in time and place, close together, you assume that that's some sort of fact that you can present to people as an argument.
Are you saying there was no communications between WikiLeaks and the Trump campaign?
No, I'm saying that there's no association with WikiLeaks and the Russian Federation or Julian, ever, anywhere.
But there's associations between the Trump campaign and Russia. So this is where, no, but this is where it comes from. That's why he's under suspicion, is these associations.
Mr. Trump had associations with, I don't
He's
know,
under
there were
suspicion too.
50,000 people. And now you draw out of this box of the turmoil of Trump's life, one association is talk about making friends with Putin and Julian Assange, because he communicates. What about all the other people that communicate with Trump? For God's sake, that's a religious association. There's no fact in it. You have to give us a fact. You have to say.
The fact is Russian, the
He he's not charged, he's not charged with anything you're talking about. It doesn't exist in the indictment.
No,
so,
I know that.
So, but I don't understand. Yeah, you're trying to muddy the waters because.
I'm not trying to muddy waters. I'm trying to say.
No, that's exactly what you're doing. Like, let's get back to the indictment and the allegations within the indictment.
Said he conspired with others to hack into the.
No, so that's a mistake. So the allegation, no. So the allegation, let's just look at that particular allegation. Can we just look at that allegation on its own and look at it and just what sort of journalistic activity that would affect? So the allegation is that Julian assisted Chelsea Manning to hide her identity.
That's not the allegation.
Yes, that is.
The allegation is that he encouraged others to hack.
No.
Yes,
So that has been brought on. That's in the third indictment.
I give you the link if you want.
Well, I mean, I'm just talking about the actual indictment and what the charge is related to. So,
and I'm talking about the actual indictment as reported by the New York Times.
Okay.
Maybe the New York Times is wrong. That's
perhaps
possible.
they are. I mean, they've been wrong a lot of many times. You remember the WMDs? I mean, did they exist?
Jane, as you listen to this,
Yes.
what do you have to say?
Well, this was my concern about being involved in this panel, is that there's such strong feelings. And I really have to thank the family for recognizing that he's not a whistleblower. That's not a bad indictment. He's a journalist and he gets those First Amendment protections. I will say, however, when I looked at the Mueller report in 2019, because I was looking at this whole whistleblower aspect, the Mueller report pointed to the fact that WikiLeaks founder, Julian, is not a whistleblower. They also made the statement that he had the support of Russian intelligence, and they considered him, now this is according to Mueller, and WikiLeaks was considered a non-stable, hostile intelligence service. So they're pretty severe, and that's why people really hesitate to get involved, because there is so much flying around. And we work strongly with Whistleblowers UK. Over there, they are just incredible supporters of Julian, but they support whistleblowing. And when I've been over there, I've told them he's a publisher. Let's not get the two confused. So, but there does appear to be a lot of confusion, and I'm glad the family's here tonight. And I'm glad the professor's here tonight to kind of, state how that confusion exists.
I don't, that I speak strongly doesn't mean that I have anger in my soul to anybody who presents these arguments, because I'm really very familiar with them over a period of 14 years. They come again and again and again, despite all of the work that people do to demonstrate the facts of these associations.
One of the things that I had to ask myself after watching the film is why the UK government, how it comes to have jailed Julian Assange in the circumstances it has, how it's treating him as such a serious criminal. And I just don't understand where that's coming from and why. And I don't understand why entirely, why so many journalists are hostile to Julian in this country, and they are. I mean, I was reviewing some of what's been written about this, an editorial in the Washington Post from, I think it was 2019, that was very hostile to Julian. And so there's an argument here in this country and in journalistic circles about whether, if Julian is a journalist, if he's a publisher, and if he's convicted, the press had better watch out because they're next. They can, same charges can be lodged against them. Do you think that's true, Allison? In other words, national security reporters, people who accept material from whistleblowers in some cases and publish secret classified information, that if Julian Assange can be tried and potentially convicted for doing so, can journalists also have to worry about that?
Well, there's a long history of journalists being persecuted.
Yes, there is.
For the work they do in the national security space. And I support the work that they do, but I think because this case is complicated in so many ways that we've been talking about, the leap to worrying that this is a huge slippery slope that will tumble down if he is brought to trial is not one that I find persuasive. Now, I will say that the Supreme Court rules that section 230 is no longer viable. That's going to mean that Facebook and WikiLeaks can be held accountable.
Well, that's probably coming at some point.
Right. So it's just like a lot is in flux.
But the current case before the Supreme Court, the justices all seem very afraid.
Yes.
To deal with, and they said openly they don't understand what the issue is with social media.
That's correct.
But how, you haven't seen the film, I recognize that.
No,
but
I haven't, and I want to.
But you're aware of his being held under such severe circumstances.
That upsets me enormously.
And
as a human being.
But how do you explain it as somebody who's
I'm wondering if they really have something. That's what after these but then there's it's an indictment from it's prosecution from the Trump administration. We all went through this crazy time during those 4 years. So I don't know what's true.
May I ask the family a question real quick?
Please.
Yeah.
I know he's sitting in terrible circumstances over there, but he keeps appealing the extradition, and the United States has vowed that they're not going to do anything, kill him or anything like that. And he could be transported to another country if he is extradited. But he keeps appealing. Why does he keep appealing when he's in such a dire situation? Can I ask you that?
Oh,
Gabriel, John, why does he appeal?
Oh, it's just a bit of a mess, really. But I'm not in the way you're taking. Just Julian Assange is charged under the Espionage Act.
A little louder, please.
Julian Assange is charged under the Espionage Act with 18 charges. 17 of them relate to the possession of classified information handed to him by allegedly Chelsea Manning. John Young of Kryptone published all of the cables, unredacted, a day before Julian Assange. Nobody's rung him up. Nobody's charged him with Espionage Act. So that's the specificity, okay? Why Julian is held incommunicado is because he has a platform. He has a voice. His voice, if he could speak, would reverberate in his defense. Many people listen. It's a global news organization of mammoth effect over the last 10 years. That is substantial. And so they don't want him to speak. Aside from that, the embarrassment that Julian's publications of Manning's leaks have caused malice. Malice after malice after malice, deluge. I was in Scotland in a forum like this, and at the end of it, the Scotsman said in his brogue, and they can speak, you know, when they speak, the words come out like hammers if they want. When you finished here, John, I got a title of the book for you. A Deluge of Malice. It's 13 years. It's moving to 14 years. He hasn't been out. You know, I was speaking on the phone and he heard a horse. You know, he heard a horse, the guy talking on the phone. A horse went by, clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop. Oh, that's such a lovely sound. That's malice. 7.5 years in the embassy, being chased by sections of the United States government, in particular, the CIA, in particular, the FBI involved itself in, this is another thing. If the FBI involved itself in 2010, wrote to the Swedish prosecutor, Marianne Nye. Marianne Nye immediately erased the communication. And a little later in 2012, 2011, the FBI went to Iceland under derogatory permission. That means that you can go there and act like a policeman in a certain area, 9 of them. They went there and interviewed a man named Thor Darson, who is a convicted paedophile and a convicted fraudster, offering him immunity from prosecution if he testified against Julian Assange. This was the establishment of the first indictment. Okay. So that's an allegation by an Icelander against an Australian for a crime in Iceland brought by the United States as an extradition proceeding in the English court against an Australian. It's nuts. It's no judicial foundation whatsoever for this indictment. None.
But sir,
can you speak to the involvement of the FBI?
But sir, that is true. That is true. And as you well know, that gentleman retracted his assertions against your son. So that shows to me that the criminal justice system works. And here again, I don't understand why your son doesn't just simply come over here to clear his name. He's got tons of supporters throughout the world. They would certainly show up in the United States. Nothing is going to happen to him. He's putting himself in this situation. I'm just asking you, I don't know, but he's putting himself into this situation when he has a clear ability to, you know, find justice here.
You know, it's well within his rights.
I just want to echo what Jane is.
Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I just want to echo what Jane is saying, because the Biden administration has said that if he's extradited to the United States, they will treat him humanely. He won't be in the highest security prison, and that if he is convicted, he can serve his term in Australia.
Oh, yeah. I read that in the New York Times as well.
Yeah. But it was quoting the Biden administration directly.
Oh, God's sake. Look, it's Julian.
So my question to you is
I'll
why not
answer the
do it
question.
that way? Because then
I'll
you get home
answer
to
the
Australia.
question. It's Julian's right to defend himself. There's over 100 lawyers involved within the circumstances that the lawyers describe are actualities, not potentials. Okay, actualities. One of the actualities is this, that the average case in the espionage court takes 2 years. You're locked up for 2 years. The average to get to the Supreme Court is 10. That's 12. Is already been 14. I mean, shake your head. This is a mammoth injustice. You expect, and you propose, why does he do? Because the circumstances are that if he comes to the United States, he's been in possession of classified information. That means it's an administrative decision, unappealable in the courts, that he goes under SAMS, special administrative measures. I'll describe SAMS to you. In Colorado, there are 20 cells in a row. All of those people are under SAMS. They're 24 hours a day in solitary confinement. Every half an hour, somebody comes around and looks through the peephole. There's 2 doors. One's a wooden door facing the prisoner. The next door, separated by about that much, is a steel door. Some of them have been in there for 10 years. They're mad as, you know, they're just mad. They howl. The howling starts off when one prisoner tries to speak to another. And they have to shout at the top of their voices. The mad prisoners join in this hellish cacophony to make some sort of communication with anything, because they're locked up 24 hours.
But John, is there evidence that Julian would be?
I just gave it to you. Special administrative measures are an administrative determination founded upon the fact that you had exposure to classified information, and as a consequence, you can speak to somebody who hasn't been exposed to it. Really clear. These things are.
I think we should take questions from members of the audience, and John McCabe is over here, Logan Richmond over here with microphones, and I guess you could take the microphone to the questioner, John.
I should laugh a bit.
But please keep them brief.
Anybody hear me? Yeah. Actually, I can.
No, that we can't at all. It may
Right
not
here?
be- Now you can. Can you tell us who you are, please?
My name is Jack. I'm just a
Okay,
regular
Jack.
citizen. I'm way
Go
past
ahead.
college age. I'm way past college age. I'm kind of a neutral observer here in the room. Question is to Mr. John Shipton. You had an interview, you had a podcast interview in the 3rd week of February with the Conscientious Investor Network. The older gentleman said to you, oh, I heard there's a hearing coming up on February 24th. And then February 24th came and I didn't hear anything about a hearing. Did something happen with that hearing? Did you all hear that it was postponed or canceled, or from the High Court? I'm talking about the UK High Court.
Yeah, somebody, a lawyer rang me up and said, we expect the determination of the judge on the 24th of February. However, that lawyer has turned out to be mistaken. Yeah.
That was easily answered. Yes, Logan over here, or wherever.
Hi, sorry.
That's okay.
I'll make sure you're next. I'm sorry. I didn't
Anytime.
mean-
Don't worry.
Okay. Hi, my name's Jose Vega. I came all the way from the Bronx, New York, for this event. Very happy to be here in this room. Usually I yell at politicians, but Allison, it must be pretty difficult, and I commend you for this, to be up there and take the State Department position, which is clearly wrong. And, I also know you're a Middlebury educated person. And I think it's just kind of funny because all the people I know who are educated at Middlebury end up working for the State Department, whether it's John Perkins or Ari Fleischer, who was the speaker for George H. Bush, I believe. And so, it just happens to be that college tends to be a lot of people who work for the State Department in a not very good way. And so, my question to you is,
I work for the State Department too.
well, okay, well, there you go. You just proved my point there. And
Was that necessarily bad to work for the State Department?
yes.
I think
We
I
need
disagree
to
with
keep
that.
questions succinct, just as
Go
a
ahead.
reminder.
Yeah.
We need to get this ball rolling.
But yeah, sorry, no problem. So my question is what is it like taking the wrong position here and just repeating what you read on New York Times, because you cite them a lot. Do you have an original thought, or do you only just recite what you
That's not that's.
I do, and I've written books, and you can read them and judge for yourself. If I haven't seemed to have had an original thought here today. I think it's an immensely complex issue. I've tried to convey that. I don't think it's simple. That's what an educated person should do under these circumstances. But then why not bring Julian Assange to trial? Well, that's not what some people think. Then we might as well not have a justice system at all.
If the microphone.
There can be differences of opinion, as you're seeing here today, right?
Hey, my name's Josh Rushing. I'm a journalist.
Microphone a little closer, please.
Sure. I'd like to maybe try to clarify a couple of things. I have covered this case. All the Russia stuff you bring up, he's not charged with any of it. Any of it. All the DNC stuff, he's not charged with any of it.
No, I know.
The charge with CFAA, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, it's a 6-page indictment. Anyone here, if you Google Assange indictment, you can read it right now. It's 6 pages. It's not about encouraging anyone else.
No,
It is about a supposed conversation between Chelsea and somebody on the other end of a Jabber account, asking to help get into an administrator account. So Chelsea could log back in as administrator rather than herself.
Yeah.
That's the whole charge, not encouraging others.
To cover tracks.
The other 17 charges. Yeah, it was to protect our identity. The other 17 charges, the Espionage Act charges, 10 years each, are for the things that national security journalists do every day. And it isn't about protecting, you said the First Amendment here and not the First Amendment overseas. It does affect the First Amendment here because the precedent is set that they can go after publishers or journalists like that with him, then they can go after publishers and journalists, other ones in the future. Also a precedent, if I publish state secrets from Israel or Pakistan, now they can come and get me in the US because we are charging an Australian citizen in the UK with violating our secrecy laws.
Not secrecy laws.
So
he's accused of being a spy.
The Espionage Act is mostly used against whistleblowers, not spies.
It's used against people working against the interests of the United States.
He's not accused of being a spy anywhere in the indictment. In the 17 charges, he's accused of having classified information and publishing it. The same information, let me say, the same information the New York Times published, and no one there has been indicted. The same information the Guardian published.
It's not the same though.
Well,
it's not the
Editor-in-Chief of the Guardian told me it was.
A very small part of it.
The
unredacted stuff.
That's not true. They're in possession.
They're in possession of all of it, and then it leaked out.
Yeah, I do have a question.
No, they're in possession of everything.
So,
and then they published
the
passphrase.
And then
they published it. The Guardian published the passphrase that was given to them in trust.
Password for the
Passphrase. Anyway, it's a passphrase. Sorry to interrupt. Please.
No, it's okay, Mr.
I don't know
Shipton.
what that refers to, John.
A Guardian journalist published a book with the password that had the files for all the unredacted information. That's how John Young at Krypton ended up publishing all the unredacted information before WikiLeaks did. So my real question here is, if you take away all the stuff he's not charged with, which is the majority of what you were talking about, what you see is a guy who's in the harshest prison in the UK for publishing the truth and without having been prosecuted for anything. It's persecution before prosecution. And you're asking that same individual, trust the US system and come here. You'll get a fair shake. You can see why he might be dubious of that, right?
What do we know about what the Biden and how the Biden administration would handle this case?
They have said, as I stated, they have said that he would not be held in a high security prison because of his mental.
So there's,
health
I
state,
think you're
and
referring
that
to
he would-
assurances were given. So there was assurances, but these assurances, they're not, they have a caveat in them. So if you actually read the actual material from the prosecution, it says at the bottom that the circumstances can be changed at any time.
So
by
these
the
assurances
government.
were given in the extradition hearing.
But they're not assurances at all. You know, Amnesty International has said they're not worth the paper they're printed on because they have a caveat in them that says the situation can be changed at any time. But they are political assurances, and so they're accepted by the High Court because the High Court can't turn around and.
Look, we're painting a very dark picture of the US government and the justice system. We can have different.
We've got direct experience with it.
One thing though, you know, Chelsea Manning suffered a great deal and then had her sentence commuted by President Obama. Right? It's possible that that can happen too.
No, if Gabriel,
That's the same government that did that.
If
right?
Julian becomes a tranny, then he can be commuted. I mean, it's just nuts.
Are there other questions? Comments?
Address these things.
It's true though.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Kathy Boylan. I'm from the Dorothy Day Catholic Worker, founded by a Jesuit, Father Richard McSorley, who got a lot of trouble. And everyone who goes to Georgetown, look up Father McSorley. But anyway, you know what happened to Chelsea Manning?
You know how to use a microphone, and I appreciate that. Go ahead.
Good. I don't really need it, but Chelsea Manning was put back into the Fairfax County Jail because they wanted her to testify. And she said, everything I've said, I went to her trial. I don't know if you did, but you could have gone to her trial and found out.
This was a contempt of court.
Because she did not want to testify
before a grand
and
jury.
maybe Julian's family would explain it. But I'd also like them to tell us what conditions the espionage charge that he'd be charged with. What are the conditions in the trial? The other speaker thinks that it's a wonderful open trial in the United States. What would happen? Could he call witnesses? Would he know? Tell us about what would happen to him in a trial in the United States.
You mean in the espionage
right
court?
Well, there's not an espionage court.
Well, it's called.
He can be tried in federal court on espionage charges, as was Daniel Ellsberg.
Yeah.
And I covered that trial. And
reality winner.
He could call any witnesses he wanted to. The government made sure that Daniel Ellsberg couldn't be convicted because they behaved so stupidly and ruined their own case. I don't know if that would happen again ever as badly as it happened then. But
it's already happened. Gabriel explained it to you in detail. The members of the CIA leaked the information to those two journalists, Issakoff and Dorfman. That was published in Yahoo. It's already tainted. This is I attempt, in fairness to the audience, to only bring facts. And you can assemble them whichever way you like, and if you go out of here and you think, well, Julian ought to come back here and have these sort of hearings that are proposed, where it'd take about 12 years to get to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would more than likely say, we can't run with this, there's some chance that he'd get off. But it's just ridiculous. It's already been a persecution of smearing, mobbing, lying, cheating, FBI offering immunity for prosecution to a witness. He was an Icelander. They can't offer him.
But that's already been.
No, it's not.
It's still in the
I'm doing what I'm doing is I'm building a pyramid. I'm starting with a base. Crime after, due process collapse after due process collapse, after fraud, after manipulation. Then I build it right up to the latest thing, the very latest thing, which was covered briefly here. The immunity, the assurances from that prosecutor, Kronsberg. I mean, anyway, I don't want to scandalize him, but there's plenty there. The assurances are foundless. We can change our mind at any time, we'll give whatever circumstance. You walk past this side of the hallway, that side of the hallway, they can change their mind. One after the other, a certain section of the United States Department of Justice called the National Security Section delivers itself to this matter. The FBI, territorial, is really important because the FBI is a powerful institution, the CIA is a powerful institution. They don't take each other's territory. It's begun as a police operation, 2010, with a email to the Swedish prosecutor, Marianne Nye. It continued with the 2012 movement into Iceland to suborn a witness. It continued with the thieving of Julian's papers out of the embassy, and all of those papers transferred over to Quito, and those papers given to the FBI. Now, they were his defense, tainted again and again.
If it's tainted, his lawyers can certainly bring that up in a prosecution in the courts in this country. That's how Ellsberg was never convicted. He was never acquitted, but never convicted because the case was tainted. There's another question over here. Yeah, let's go to this gentleman whose hand is up. I'll come back to you.
Thank you very much. Nabil Saleh, I'm a journalist from Baghdad and
From where?
Baghdad, Iraq, Barbaria, as implicitly categorized by Rome, where we are now. Thank you for mentioning the footage where Namir was massacred, and I could have been Namir. And there's a quote from Walter Benjamin, the late revolutionary philosopher, who says, even the dead will not be safe from the enemy if he wins. I sit here and I speak to you, I hear you diverting the conversation towards Russia, which is completely irrelevant as we mark 20 years since the annihilation of my people and the destruction of my country. Why is it so difficult for you to step out of the bubble that the United States of America has no moral authority to summon people at whim? That's my question.
Jane? Allison?
Oh, the question is simple. They feel that he broke the law. So you may call it being summoned, which probably is correct, but they feel that he broke the law. And I will say that other people who were found under the Espionage Act, Chelsea, Tom Drake, we have a whole group of people, Reality Winner, the Fenton whistleblower. None of them took 12 years. These espionage cases usually occur very quickly.
never lost.
Oh dear. Julian Assange is an Australian citizen. All the mentioned people are citizens of the United States, tried under United States laws. Extraterritorial reach has become a problem. Every country, 82% of the world, considers it a difficulty that the United States uses extraterritorial reach of its own laws based upon treaty obligations and extradition, bring these people to the United States as a demonstration of its power.
And sir, you're correct. Your son has thousands and thousands of people who support him. I've seen it over in England. There's no two ways about it. But the government, the United States government, feels that he helped Chelsea Manning with the hacking. So yes, they have a right. You have an American citizen in Chelsea Manning. This whole thing with your son is like a porcupine. It just is really tough, very confusing, and there's a lot going on. But he still has that option. He still has that option to come back.
Well, I wish you'd stop saying things like that, you know, and take some consideration of the person's life and the laws involved. You know, it's like when he was in the embassy, all of the politicians that opined, let's use that word, opined on the matter, said that he can leave the embassy anytime. Well, he left the embassy. Where is he now? Extradition to the United States under espionage charges. Doesn't anybody realize accurately the use of legal instruments to pursue a person and not deal with air or with ideas like, you know, the trajectory of WikiLeaks over the period of 2006 to 2017? That's not a charge. That's an opinion about a circumstance.
Well,
charges are particular. Each of those charges, 17 of them, have a 10-year period in them of sentence. The last one, the computer intrusion assertion, is 5 years. That's the circumstance. He's been under 3 different indictments. The first indictment I described to you came about in Iceland. There's a second indictment, and the defense was dealing with the second indictment. The third indictment rocks up. A manipulation accepted by the English court. Now, Julian is in a high security prison in the United Kingdom called Belmarsh. They keep him there because they hate him. Not because it's a legal circumstance. They don't want him to speak.
But sir, he has the opportunity to come to the United States and speak.
That's the same as saying.
No, let me tell you.
Politicians.
The guy in Iceland, the guy in Iceland recanted the things he said against your son. The FBI didn't cover that up, sir. The FBI said the guy recanted. Now that's a fairness under our system.
Can I address that? The judge accepted that allegation. She didn't reject it. Judge Baritza accepted it.
And he recanted.
She accepted it. The recantation is meaningless because the judge accepted the charge as one of the charges for extradition.
But he recanted and
it doesn't matter he recanted. He could go to God and get forgiveness. But the judge accepted.
But the Bureau didn't bury that.
Sorry?
They were very upfront and honest about it. He recanted.
But the judge didn't withdraw the.
It's still in the indictment. They didn't pull it out.
Is
of
there
it.
still an indictment?
Yeah, it's still in the indictment.
It has
There's no
not been
fourth.
dismissed.
There's no fourth indictment. There's no superseding fourth indictment.
Let's just get a couple more questions. Yes. That microphone.
My name is Layla Alarian. I'm a journalist at Al Jazeera English, and my program Fault Lines is actually releasing an episode called The Imprisonment of Julian Assange on Monday in time for the 20th anniversary of the Iraq War. And in our film, we actually feature the brother of Namir Noordin, who Nabil mentioned. And he actually expresses his gratitude to Julian Assange for exposing the collateral murder video, because he says that for 3 years, they were told that his brother was killed in crossfire and that the footage actually proved that that didn't happen. And I urge you all to watch this film as well as ITHAKA, because it very much raises the questions of what is at stake for press freedom. My question is, as we, similar to what Nabil brought up, but as we mark the 20th anniversary of the Iraq War, what does it say about our country and about the system that we're expressing, some of us are expressing so much faith in, that the only people who were charged and who suffered consequences for the release of the collateral murder video are not the pilots who are laughing and callously killing innocent people, but actually those who released and published the video?
Should I answer that?
I think leave it to the Americans.
Well, who says that nothing happened to the pilots? Their careers might have been over. Do we have any evidence that nothing happened?
We don't even know their names, and a military investigation actually cleared them.
Should really use the microphone.
A military investigation cleared the pilots.
But that doesn't mean that they didn't end their career, which happens often with the military. I mean,
Do you know their names? Do you know who the pilots are? Do you know their names?
I don't.
Okay. They committed a war crime. I think that's pretty telling that none of us know their names. That says a lot.
But I'm responding to your idea that nothing happened. Their military careers could be over. We don't know.
Thank you. I just make a quick point. My name is Ann Wilcox, and I work with a group called the DC Action for Assange. We do a lot of organizing in DC, rallies at the DOJ. We do a vigil outside Merrick Garland's home in Bethesda, and he's the man that could withdraw this indictment. But I just wanted to point out a couple of resources to people here, the students. Look at AssangeDefense.org. It has a lot of information from different nonprofits like Penn International, Amnesty International, and so forth. Also, the Belmarsh Tribunal is a large conference that's been held in the last 6 months. There's been 2 sittings and a lot of good resources there from Progressive International, a lot of speeches about the case. And finally, I just want to mention that Rashida Tlaib, the Congresswoman, has a Dear Colleague letter that she's trying to get members to sign on, calling on Garland to withdraw the indictment, because many congressmen and many of us feel that it is a political issue because he embarrassed the United States. And so they're trying to take it to Congress and get Congress to speak out. Thank you.
We should also, I think it's worth mentioning the 5 partners who published the cables. So the 5 prestige media organizations, New York Times, The Guardian, El Pais, Le Monde, and Der Spiegel, have all written to Merrick Garland asking them to drop the endless prosecutions against Julian Assange. That was their word.
And has Garland replied at all?
No, there's no response from the Garland DOJ, and that was on November 30th. 10 days later, there's a group of 24 press freedom, human rights organizations, First Amendment groups in the US. So all the biggest ones, ACLU, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, they all wrote a letter to Merrick Garland, asking him to drop the charges. All these organizations, the New York Times.
So what do you theorize, or what do your lawyers tell you about why Merrick Garland won't take that step?
Well, I mean, it's obviously the national security DOJ who are pushing forward with this. From a leftover from under the Trump administration, I think they see WikiLeaks and they see Julian Assange and they, they want to make an example of him and say, if you publish this kind of information, if you, publish this, evidence of, CIA spying on telephones or this evidence of war crimes or evidence of corruption, that this is what's going to happen to you. You will have no rights. You'll have no right to due process. You'll have no speech rights. We can just take them away from you with, with impunity. I think that is the message that is being sent at the moment with this current prosecution.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough that this man is held incommunicado. What does that tell you? All of the pabulum of possibility in the United States courts. They are not possibilities. The actuality is that he is held incommunicado.
And why is that, John? Why is he held incommunicado? And underneath all this, what?
I suppose, they're human institutions, so they display malice and also revenge and also a determination to demonstrate, and also that Julian may have a voice and may be able to get support around the world by speaking out for himself on the street corners, as we do. Those elements are enough to, it's clear that there's no need to hold Julian Assange, a publisher, in a maximum security prison. I'll give you one example. This is a beauty. In the court, Julian, in the hearing, 3 weeks it took, Julian was in a glass box, and the glass box has got a raised floor, and the well of the court is below. There's a slot in the glass box every 2 feet, about that wide. The prosecutors and the people from the DOJ are sitting in the world of the court, and they whisper to each other and pass their documentation to each other. The defense appeals to the judge and says, can Julian, he's a publisher, not a violent criminal, sit in the well of the court, please? She said, no, that I don't have that power of decision making. Either you'll have to make a bail application and he'll be bailed to come out of the glass box, the terrorist box at the back, and sit in the court. A bail application. People are kidding here, are they? Then the defense barrister argued a little bit more, and she replied, well, it's not actually my decision. The decision belongs to the people in the jail who bring, the jail governor. Okay, we argue the jail governor. Then it's revealed it's not the jail governor, it's not the judge of the court, it's actually the people who drive the truck have a separate contract. So Julian has to have his trial for 3 weeks, get on his knees in the glass box. The barrister on the other side stand on the tiptoes, and he whispers through a slot in the glass.
That seems pretty extreme.
Doesn't anybody get it? That this is deliberate malice over and over and over again. The Conventions of Asylum, 1973, presented to the United Nations General Assembly by Australia, of all places, carried 116 abstentions. To be an asylee, you have to make an application. It's a process, a legal process, and you're granted asylum. To remove asylum is a legal process. Julian was dragged out of the embassy without that process. Okay, he's in the embassy, and in the last 18 months, they restrict his communication ability and so on. And they change the guards over and they change the staff over, because after 7.5 years, the people in the staff become family and the guards treat you decently. They bring in another lot of the guards and he walks down the hallway and they, you know, it's just disgraceful.
Well, can I mention that whistleblowers are very familiar with retaliation, with marginalization, everything else. But when I was constructively discharged from the FBI, they wrote that I embarrassed the Bureau. So, you know, you've got to have hope that things will work out down the road. I know that you have a huge amount of support. Movies are being made. You're being hosted tonight. You've got to continue with hope that your loved one eventually will see the light of day. And I do believe that's possible. The United States government has already backed off a series of things because now they do consider him a journalist. But the most important thing is hope. You've got to have that. And I think you've got a lot of supporters there, Dad, that are going to back him come hell or high water.
I think on that note, we're going to conclude. Okay, sure, yeah. Quickly, please.
Is this working? Yes. You exclaimed that some members of the audience had a very dark view of the United States. And I would argue.
Who said that? I'm sorry.
There were some of the, you said that in response to some of the questions. And I would say, and that was as a source of mistrust for the treatment that Julian Assange would receive, not that he should be tried in the first place here because he didn't commit a crime. But I would say in response to that, that impression is well earned. It's been well earned, a dark impression of the United States by a country that killed 1 million people in Iraq, by a country that is currently occupying 1/3 of Syria, the breadbasket and the oil producing region, a country that destroyed Libya with false NATO authorizations for war. The United States has earned that distinction. 800 military bases around the world as the most warmongering country since the United Kingdom, since it became the global hegemon. Julian Assange is someone that the CIA tried to assassinate. They plotted to assassinate him. The idea that he would receive some kind of fair hearing, or that he is receiving some kind of fair hearing, is ludicrous. And ending someone's career, speaking to the collateral murder video, is not justice for committing a war crime. Nor is it.
Sir, I apologize. Would you mind, sir, would you mind getting to your question, please? I apologize.
Sure. And the United States became a party to that war crime when there was no consequences for the people who did that. But what I wanted to ask is something that's been touched upon here and there, but never answered directly, never confronted directly. And I think there's a reason for that. The New York Times, The Guardian, Le Monde, even the Obama administration believed that prosecuting Julian Assange as a would essentially open the door to prosecuting publishers. There were other publishers, the Washington Post, the New York Times, that published the same content, the same revelations that WikiLeaks was publishing. That's why that op-ed was written by the editorial boards of these leading global newspapers that stated that if we go ahead with the prosecution of Julian Assange, we're opening the door to the prosecution of any publishers around the world. So that's my question is, how do you agree or disagree with the assessment of the New York Times, Le Monde, The Guardian, and the Obama administration that to prosecute Julian Assange would open the door to prosecuting any publishers?
Are you asking me that question?
No, I'm asking her and her.
Oh.
I've already answered.
Want to give it one more shot?
No, because
It's wind up time.
No, my answer is no, it would not result in other publishers. I think the government knows they got a tiger by the tail here. I don't think they're going to do this one again for a long time.
You know, you're not going to be heard unless you have a microphone, and you can do it quickly, but we're really coming to the end of the program. There will be no point adding it. The audience not in this room will not hear it without the microphone.
I just want to add one thing, one little thing. The New York Times is not, it is only the 42-year-old publisher of the New York Times. His name is Salzberger, A.G. Salzberger, who signed that letter. It does not reflect the 2,000 or 3,000 employees of the New York Times. We have no idea what they think. This is all coming from one man. So I'm just letting you know that. It's the opinion of one man.
That's helpful. I really appreciate the passion that people have brought this subject. And I appreciate that you have stayed around to hear other points of view. And it's beyond my wildest expectation that we've aired this as thoroughly as we have. And out of respect for people's time, I'm going to say we're finished for the evening, but thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Jane. Thanks. I forget the other lady. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.